Right, Mr. Christo, to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an honor for me to be invited here to talk to all of you. It's a difficult session because it's after lunch. I hope I will be able to keep you all awake. The outline of my presentation, I will first give you an overview of the global industry, the characteristics of the yarn and textile and clothing industry. There's a quick run through. Then look at how investors evaluate new production bases, and what can government do, and what can global agencies like ADB do. And industry, if you look at this slide, you can't decide whether it is a sunrise or sunset. To some country, the textile and garment industry is a sunset industry. And to some industry, it's a sunrise industry. So it depends on what stage of the economic development is. The global clothing industry, we're talking about global clothing. Clothing meaning apparel, not textile, not fabric. It's just the clothing industry. Has grown from $40 billion in total export from 1980 to $300 billion in 2011. An average of 21% growth. What does that mean? It means that more people are not sewing their own clothes. It means that more people are outsourcing from outside their country. However, throughout these 30 years or so, no major changes in importing countries. If you look at this map from the WTO website, the major importing country in 1980 was US, Europe, Russia, and Japan. If you look at the dots, the size of the dot. In 2011, it is still US, Europe, Japan. Russia has reduced in size, partly because of the integration of USSR is split into many other countries. Let's go back and look at it again. The major blocks are still there. Okay? The major exporting countries have been playing musical chairs. For those who don't understand about this thing about quota, textile quota, there was some restriction being placed by importing countries like US and Europe back in the early 70s on limiting the export of textile and garment to their country, to US and Europe. So in the early years, countries with quota will have an advantage. But they've been moving, the buyers are moving the manufacturer from quota country to non-quota countries. So countries like Fiji became an exporting country at one stage. Countries like Brunei become an exporting country at one stage because they are non-quota. The US did not impose quota on them. So it becomes very interesting for people in the manufacturing industry to go there and set up production plant. But after this thing called the multi-fiber agreement MFA expires in 2005, it becomes the cheapest country wins. The cheapest country, being a labor-intensive industry, would be labor cost is one of the key factors. But US and Europe have been playing things like free trade agreements, GSP things, that shifted the production basis for them. They want to go to a country whereby they don't have to pay import duty. So for example, if the US buys a product from Singapore or Vietnam or any country, China, of a t-shirt, they have to pay something in the region of 16% duty to import into US. But because Singapore and US signed a free trade agreement, if we obey the rules of free trade agreement, we can export from Singapore to US without paying the 16%. That's a cotton-based product. But on synthetic product, like sportswear, the sports shirts, which are made of synthetic fiber, is 33% duty. The savings is enormous. So any country with a free trade agreement with US or Europe, you have that advantage. But that's provided the market is US and Europe. So if you look at the exported countries in 1980, Germany or Europe has a big chunk of exports out of Europe in the early 80s. You know, France, Italy, Spain, and so on and so forth. They exported Belgium. So are the four dragons: the Korea, the Taiwan, the Hong Kong, and to some extent Singapore, Malaysia, and India to some extent. Even US export garment in the 1980s. Now you look at 2011. The dot has shrunk for US. China has grown in size. The Korea and the Taiwan and the Hong Kong has shrunk. Hong Kong still have a fairly big circle there, partly because of some transshipment out of China. But the shifting has begun over the years. A change from the four dragons to China become a bigger dog. Go back to look at China. It was a smaller dog. Right? And don't forget, in those years, it was 40 billion. Now we're talking about 300 billion. That's the difference in magnitude. So the small changes in circle actually means a lot of money as well. Okay? Europe still export quite a lot of garments, but more in a high fashion, high value item. If you take a quick look at the world of global clothing industries that supply, people that supply, countries that supply, I rank them by GDP per capita. This is a purchasing power parity. Let's focus on China. In 2009, the minimum wage was 106. In 2012, it gone up more than double to 272. That's minimum wage on average. Okay, because China is a big country, the coastal area minimum wage is different from the inland. The real wage is actually 450. The real wage, I got it from factories that I know, and I asked them, what are you paying your workers nowadays? That is in 2012. You look at Bangladesh, it was $67 in 2009. It is now $55. It's gone down. Don't believe it? They actually increased their salary. In 2010, I think there was a big increase 3 years ago. Huh? 2010, November. Huh? They have increased their minimum wage by 80%, but they're still at 55%. What is the problem here? Why is it so? Currency fluctuation. Our industry, labor intensive, price sensitive, currency exchange rate is important for us. But for electronic, high value item, maybe not so much. As the previous speaker said so. So I disagree on that point. Look at Madagascar. It was $81, it's now $45. The real wage is 85. Why is it so? They have political instability. They had a coup in 2002, they had another coup in 2009, 2010, right? It driven down the currency, and it became one of the cheapest in the world. But the US is saying, I don't want to accept anything from Bangladesh until they sort out their political situation. Okay? So many things affect how a country or a buyer buys from another country. Many things affect how an investor decides where to set up their production base. These are just some of the examples, but if you look at the real wage column, you'll find that most of the countries are in the $100 range in terms of real take-home pay by their workers or cost of investors. You're in the region of $100 to $120. Any country that has lower value in wage would be advantageous for our industry. The textile and clothing supply chain, if you look at this map here, is very complicated. The question now is, if you are a country and a decision maker, which one of those blocks you want to start? At the top of the slides are capital-intensive industry or subsection of the subsector of the industry. You can, if you are good, you have the climate to grow cotton, do so. If you have petrochemical product, you should go into looking at developing a yarn industry for polyesters or man-made fiber product, making use of the byproduct of the petrochemical. Like, for example, one of the things we've been talking about possibility for Brunei, they're producing a lot of oil as a byproduct can be used for making synthetic yarns. If you, like Uzbekistan or Mozambique, you can grow cotton, then you go into cotton ginning, then the next thing you want to look at is, can you go into spinning into yarn. And after you get yarn, then you go into weaving and knitting as an industry to start. Of course, you can import yarn and go straight into weaving or knitting. But all these are capital intensive, meaning it needs a lot of money. The labor intensive part with lesser capital involvement are the government production. Okay? And going to the service side would be your fashion designers, fashion design part, the retailing part. Okay? These are the few blocks which I think, as an emerging economy, you can look at it and decide what is your strength and where you want to start. Just a quick overview of the yarn and textile industry. When you say yarn are something like thread that mixed into textile. Okay, textiles are fabric. Okay, so the yarn and textile industry is capital intensive, is land intensive. It takes up a lot of land. The bulk of the machinery, because it's so big, it's very difficult to relocate. So if you can get somebody to invest in the textile yarn industry, is good because they'll be there for many years. It's very difficult for them to move. Okay? But you got to think about pollution control because your fabric needs to be dyed when you put on colors and you have pollution control requirements. So it's a very high barrier of entry and exit. Even to get out is going to be difficult because you got to think about how to move the machine out. Water supply must be cheap. Electricity must be cheap. I was in Botswana last month. The water is over $3 US per cubic meter. Okay? Compared with most of the other countries that are producing textiles, it's less than $1. Electricity. A lot of countries are talking about less than 10 cents per kilowatt hour. If you are talking about 20 cents, 30 cents, you are not competitive for the yarn and textile industry. And the textile industry normally follows the garment industry. If there's a garment industry, there's likelihood that people are going to start their textile and yarn factory in that same country. So the conclusion is that usually owned by the state, which will put in the money to invest, or big conglomerate, big organization. Whereas the clothing industry, for making garments, is labor intensive. Labor intensive, predominantly female. Even in Bangladesh, there's a lot of male sewers, right? But 90% still women, yeah? 90% still women, but there's still much more male sewers than in other countries. But other countries are like 99%. If you go to Malaysian factories, even Singapore factories in the past, it's like 99.9% female. Bangladesh is 10%. Relatively low capital requirement. Sewing machine, basic one costs $300. Okay. You start a factory, 20 machines, you can start a small factory. Machineries are very mobile. There's no setup time, literally. You ship it up to a country and then start production almost immediately. So it can be relocated easily. So the barrier of entry and exit is very easy. It means that if you are trying to get foreign investors to make garments in your country, if your policy is not right, they can pack up and go tomorrow. It's very easy. Okay? But having said that, garment industry is the best industry for underdeveloped countries and startup economy. Look at Korea, South Korea, look at Taiwan, look at Hong Kong, look at Singapore, the four dragons. Our economy developed in the 50s and 60s from textile, from garment, in fact, started as garment and textiles. Many, many examples around the world, you look at it. The garment industry is a starting industry for emerging economy. It provides employment, it provides foreign currency. As a policymaker, you've got to look at it and say, is this what you want? If this is the objective is provide employment, then this is the industry that you want to look at. Of course, there are many, many other factors to look at before you decide. Over the years, I have been investing in many countries or partnering people in various countries. So I have to evaluate which country is best for us to start a production income. So geographical location is very important. The closeness to a raw material source and or the consumer market. Which market are you targeting? Are you targeting US and Europe? Then you must be close to them, or at least the transportation, the logistics must be fast enough for you to reach those markets. Alternatively, you are cut short there because, for example, in Singapore, if we import, we don't have industry there now, we're very, very small. But in the early years, we import fabric, say, from China. It takes about 10 days. In fact, strict sailing time is only about 7 days. So we're pretty close to our raw material. And to the US, it takes us 17 days to 20 days to ship to US. So it is kind of okay, but in total, the raw materials and the finished product spends almost a month on sea. Now, if you are producing out of Madagascar, at one stage I was producing out of Madagascar, it takes 35 days for the fabric from China to get to Madagascar. It takes another 30 over days to move from Madagascar to US. It's 2 months. The logistic time frame and cost is an issue. Okay? So you have to look at it, you have to cut it down to total cost of time cost of your product should be in the region of 2 weeks to 3 weeks for finished product and raw materials movements. Geographical location, you can look at it in terms of natural disaster. Is it a country or location where there's a lot of flood, there's a lot of typhoon, because that will disrupt your production. You're talking about foreign direct investment, FDIs. So which country you want to attract? It is important to attract nearby country because ease of command and control. In those days when we want to go to investment, say for example, when Mexico came to Singapore and said, come and invest in my country. Some of my countrymen went there. They didn't do anything, but they ended up in Central America, a few of them. But it was a nightmare for command and control. When the factory shut for something, the boss had to take 30 hours to get there. Oh, okay. Better move faster. Infrastructure is important. Availability of prepared land, the shell factories, prepared land. Prepared land, you must have your electricity, your water, your communication lines ready. Sea and air transport, how fast, how frequency. When I was in Madagascar, I got out of it before the coup in 2002, because when I was there in from 1997, I went there again with my government in 2002. the question was being asked, I asked the question, what are you going to do with a port with so much investment lining up? The answer was, nothing we need to do because we're only 50% utilized. Now with the, Madam Pastor is not here, so I can say. With the policy maker saying that they don't need to invest in infrastructure, as an investor, looking at the amount of foreign investment they are attracting in 2000, I actually got out. And I was lucky I got out because there was a coup in 2002. With the Bangladesh issue, building construction code. So if you're going to provide factory shell, you've got to have a strict construction building code. Even if I'm going to build my own factory, I've got to make sure that we have that. Political climate is very important. It's been emphasized again and again. Economic stability, international relationship. If you are going to ship to US, is your relationship with the US good? If your relationship with the US is no good, forget about it because they're going to impose sanctions at any time. Myanmar at one stage, you were shipping to US. You had a sour relationship with the US. They had embargo. What happened to those factories? There were about 20,000, 30,000 workers in those years. I think in the early 90s. The US put in a sanction and they dropped to about a few thousand workers. Now it's slowly rebuilding. So that's very important. What is the international relationship with the market it's going to? The cost, the trade preferential is very important. The tariff savings I talk about. The free trade agreements. There's a new free trade agreement being negotiated now called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. Everybody is looking at it, and the investment has started to move into those countries like Malaysia and Vietnam. Labor cost is important because we're labor intensive, although labor generally takes up about 15 to 25% of our cost of production. Unbiased labor law. Some labor law are very difficult to operate. You know, things like maternity leave, things like compensation especially. This is a very sensitive issue. If you already have it in your system, to change it, it takes a lot of political will to change it. Unfortunately, that is what investors are looking for. If you've got unfavorable law, labor law, we've got to think twice. Stable currency, fluctuation of currency, I talked about just now. Utility rates, I talked about it just now. Interest rate. In African countries I just went to last month, interest rate was 15 to 17%. Totally unacceptable to us if you want to compete with the world on production. Because in our part of the world, we pay LIBOR plus, which is what? 3%, and they are paying 17%. How do you fight? You are immediately pricing yourself out. So I don't know how to solve this problem. Maybe ADB can come in and help. Repatriation of profit is important. You make money, you want to be able to get it out. Tax incentive is the last thing. Giving them tax incentive is when they make money. It's important, but it's not the only mechanism. What can government do? Develop infrastructure is very important. Don't give me a piece of land without water pipes, without sewerage, without electricity. I was in Mozambique last month. They said, land is free, but you've got to find the nearest source of electricity to connect it. You've got to find the nearest source of water to connect it. Out. Labor laws, talk about it just now. Liberalize the financial market. Your financial costs cannot be so high. Your target market, you've got to know where you want to target. US and Europe is not the only, if you're landlocked, forget about US and Europe, you don't have the time to ship. So you've got to look around your region, which country has the best economy to absorb your production, and then target those markets to sell to them. Trade facilitation, go into bilateral or multilateral negotiation for tax incentive or tariff savings, meaning duty-free. Provide incentive for FDIs and capability development. Very important capability development. You've got to have training institute in a pipeline, or provide, for example, subsidized consultancy for them to train workers to build up the capabilities of your workforce. You've got to develop industrial training program. The school can come up next, but the training program must be in place. A lot of countries start off and say, I want to go in textile and garment, I provide fashion design. Fashion design is the last thing, it's a service industry. You want to provide training for your workers, not fashion design. That is the next step. But of course, if you're a small country and you are targeting high value items, you're talking about service sector, service environment, you can go into that one. But you're talking about providing labor, employment, that's not what you want to go into, fashion design. What can global agencies like ADBs and many other agencies, there are many agencies that, in the world that can help you. Feasibility studies on consultancy. When I was in Mozambique, one of the things I said, they say they want to develop textile, because they grow cotton, they want to develop textile industry. My question to them is, your water good enough for the textile industry? Cambodia has been for some years trying to get into the textile industry, but the water is not good enough. It needs a lot of treatment before you can produce textiles. So to me is that before you want to go into that industry, you should do a feasibility studies to see what's the quality of water, is it good enough? Global agencies can help to fund that kind of consultancy. Development of the marketing kit, FDI marketing kit. A lot of countries go out and sell their product FDI and so on. The marketing kit is just not good enough. They either provide too much information or too little information. It has to be done professionally. Inbound, outbound, and this is what global agency can do. 0 minutes here. Inbound, outbound recruitment, last 2 points. Inbound, outbound recruitment of FDIs help the countries go out and look for the market, target market. They want to attract the foreign investment. Market development, that's for the buying side. Just not was the supply side. Capability development, training the workers. Resharing of trade financing. That's one part of people not delivering